So guys, this is really an intimate setting. We want everybody to be relaxed and enjoy. Last time we had a presentation like this, it was a little bit formal. And also we noticed that there were a lot of language and terminologies that some of you were not very aware of or did not really understand, therefore couldn't really follow the discussion completely. So the handout we're giving you has some basic concepts defined that are going to be part of the conversation this evening. You know, things like due diligence, which is a very important aspect of the background research that you have to do before you start any investment project. Things like cash flow, which is the income flow or the revenue that is important to determine whether your project is going to be feasible or not. Something like, you know, value add, which is part of the strategies that investors use, whether it's a core property or a core class or, you know, value creation or these opportunistic investments. All these are strategies that an investor may choose to use. And of course, over time, you want the property to appreciate, so you have appreciation. And if you have appreciation, the question then is how long you want to hold on to this piece of property in order to put your investment for profit purposes. So these are terminologies that come across when we have a conversation. But really, the focus of this presentation today is what does it take as an investor or someone who's interested in real estate to have your fundamentals right, and also to be able to come up with some kind of strategy for what you're doing. You know, what's your investment strategy, for instance? You have an idea, you have a vision, you want to pursue that vision. You may probably be scouting around to see properties that you may be interested in. What are you going to do? What does it take to be able to decide whether this property is the right one for you to invest in? So the question of due diligence is very important. And we have two people here, two very esteemed alums who are doing very well in the business. On my right, we have Mr. Dallas Pullman. William. Okay. William, of course, a graduate lab here. You know, like most of you, you know, was on the lacrosse team. You know, actually was captain, right?
Long time.
And for a long time ago. And then for a while, after graduation, I actually did some coaching before settling down to go into business and real estate. And right now, he's the VP, Vice President for Real Estate for Lehigh Valley Health Network. He's a huge health services provider in the Lehigh Valley, and also down towards Philadelphia, Quakertown, Scranton, a network of physicians for facilities, both neighborhood health clinics and facilities, specialty offices, major hospitals all over the place. So obviously they have to have some kind of strategy as to what they're doing, and they are selective in terms of the properties they pick up here and there to meet the needs of the network. So talking about acquisitions and the research that goes into that, and these concepts coming into play to determine exactly how they invest and what the potential is for growth and the anticipation of where the company is going to be heading is all part of the process of strategizing with respect to your investment in real estate. Okay. That's Dallas on my right. And then on my left, right to you guys. I have Jennifer here, Jennifer Humberger. Again, also a graduate of Lafayette from the class of 95. She's the Vice President for leasing for Brandywine Real Estate Trust, probably one of the largest publicly traded real estate investment trusts in the country, based in Philadelphia headquarters. She's in charge of most of the leasing that's done. So again, the revenue stream that is coming to all your investments and properties, office properties, a few multi-family units here and there, is going to come through her. And in the negotiation, again, they have to have some cash flow expectations, return on investment expectations, and of course, strategies as to exactly why certain properties are positioned in the market to perform certain services for which the revenue can be maximized. So again, there has to be some strategy behind what they do. Her expertise in leasing, which means she's dealing with customers and clients all the time, leasing for acquisitions for the company, again, dealing with customers and strategically picking properties all over the place. So this is really a conversation about how you develop your strategy for investment. Technologies have been defined will come into play in the discussion. So I'm going to ask Das to tell us a little bit about what he does, how he strategizes as to which properties to pick up, what are some of the challenges and opportunities that he sees for Lehigh Valley Health Network, and maybe take a few examples of what is done and the opportunities that was created in terms of the development strategy and growth strategy for the company. Okay. And then, of course, after that, we're going to ask Jennifer also to tell us a little bit about what you do. So let's start with you.
Sure.
So what's your story?
Sure. So,
And by the way, you can ask questions as we go along. If something's not clear, just go. That's why we have this.
Please raise your hand.
yeah,
Raise your hand.
stop me at any time.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
All right.
So, Lehigh Valley Health Network, we're 13 hospitals. Just in the past year, we've actually built 2 from the ground up. It's the first time we've done that in, I think it's like 50 years. Our strategy for how we pick properties and how we develop properties is there's a whole lot that goes into it. It's a lot of demographics. I have people that work for me that actually monitor township permit pulls for if a large residential company is going to build 200 homes in a certain market. It's good for me to know that. But it all goes back to population growth, which I think, as everybody knows, Lehigh Valley is one of the largest, fastest growing populations in the country. And not just the boomers, not just the older population. It's like 18 to 24. We consistently grow between 5 and 10% every year. So it's a market that is both sustainable for population as well as for healthcare. So for us, locations in the valley, as healthcare is going to transition to I want to be able to see my doctor when I need something right away instead of having to drive into the city, is really convenient. Being on the corner of Main and Main with a large sign on a signalized location with our logo on it, every building looks similar. Walking in, it looks the same, similar to what you find at like a McDonald's or Burger King. It really gives a comfort to the customer, or the patient in this case. And so as populations grow and as markets grow and new homes get built, we like to find the location within those markets that is kind of centralized to those houses that are getting built. For example, we just, 3 years ago, was one of the first pieces of property I purchased for Lehigh Valley Health Network was around 35 acres on Route 443 in Lehigh, north of here in the Carbon Market, across the street from Walmart, which, I mean, everybody knows what Walmart looks like, right? So if we're across the street from Walmart in a signalized location, probably pretty accurate to say 90% of the population already knows where you are, right? So, but that was farmland. So what we had to do was we went, bought the farmland, took it through the whole process of development, and 3 years later we've got a brand new hospital that's currently open for business. And the strategy there was, there's a lot of that population that was driving down to Allensville. So for convenience for that population, to try to maintain those patients and try to make it easier for them to get health care, we need to put something in their market as opposed to making them drive. So for each of our locations, the strategy is a little bit different, so it's kind of hard to just pinpoint one thing, but convenience is definitely one of the things, and patient access is very important to us as well. I think just to start.
Right, that's the start. So what kind of due diligence do you do specifically for those kind of sites?
There's a whole lot. So when you start, it's just the basics, you know, power lines, gas lines, traffic lights, traffic patterns, that kind of stuff. You get to work with PennDOT. You get to work with all the different utility companies to find out if, for example, in Lehighton, we had to widen the highway. So we had to add a lane of traffic for everybody to be able to turn into the hospital. We also have to pursue zoning ordinance change, which means we go to the township and try to convince the elected officials that the zoning change is something that would benefit this township, something that you need. This is a hospital that will help your community. I know it's hard to think of a hospital that wouldn't help the community, but some people are so hung up on traffic and you know, I'm used to driving 40 minutes to the hospital. I don't need to. I don't need something closer. So you have to convince people to change that zone, to make it so you can put healthcare there. Because there's very few pieces of land in cities right now that are zoned for, it's usually called institutional zone, which means that you can build a hospital there. A lot of times the institutional zone is just where the hospital already exists. So for us to go and develop something, the due diligence we have to do is to get through that township, that city, to convince them that a hospital would be good there. And like I said, it took 3 years for us to open the doors. So to get through zoning, to work with PennDOT, to widen the highways, to build the building, to get it open for business, to install the light, we had to put a new light in. We actually, PennDOT delayed our light being turned on for a couple of months, and we actually had to hire people that were flagging the traffic, telling when people want to stop and go. So we had to hire flaggers for about 3 months until the light was operational. So there's all these little weird intricacies of putting up a building that, I'll be honest, I never thought was something I'd have to worry about. And then you go to signage. Signage is a whole other thing. I mean, you think that the sign is something that you'd expect, but in that market in particular, we were allowed like a 300 square foot sign, one-sided, didn't light up at night. You know, so obviously it's a hospital, so you need a large sign that lights up 24/7, that can rotate messages, all that kind of thing. So, and that's another thing, you have to go to the township and get what's called a variance to let them, to tell them that, hey, we need this sign because it's a hospital and can you give us permission to do that? So there's a whole lot of give and take when it comes to these kind of developments, and a lot of homework that goes into effect. It's a long process. Like I said, it was 36 months before we opened for business for that, and that was a pretty good time frame.
What about you? Yes?
Thank you, everybody, for
You're right.
being here.
Yeah,
We're
thank you very much.
excited to be back. It's been quite a while. The campus looks a lot different. And if anybody did the math, since you gave my year of graduation. So my name is Jen. I work for Brandywine Realty Trust, which is, it is one of the largest real estate investment trusts in the U.S. We own about 25 million square feet of office space across the United States. Our three markets are, we're in the Philadelphia area, and that's where we're headquartered. We're also in Washington, D.C., and we're the largest landlord in Austin, Texas. So we're primarily an office REIT, although we do own a bit of multifamily. We do have a little bit of retail. Multifamily is new, and then we're also, you've probably heard a lot lately about life sciences, people building that type of space, and we're moving in that direction as well. So I don't know.
So these are specialty buildings that are customized to suit particular customers in the real estate market. And again, she said she works for Brandywine Real Estate Investment Trust. So there are different ways in which you can invest in real estate. You can be a property owner, a rental property where you buy and hold and basically generate revenue from your tenants. You can also be part of a real estate investment trust, which is created more or less like a corporation, specifically to own, develop, own, and manage property as an investment. You can also be a real estate investor in a partnership or a group that functions exactly the same way, but with different legal requirements as to what the organization of the company is about. And then you can also have a situation where you have real estate mutual funds that actually work with real estate investment trust companies to basically invest in the properties that they are investing in. So from a strategic point of view, different forms of ways in which you can actually fund the investment in terms of the structure of your investment company, which is an investment.
So, right, so essentially we're kind of like a mutual fund, and the people
Right.
who invest, so it kind of gives you, everybody, an opportunity to invest in really large scale real estate. Because, you know, not anybody's just gonna go buy a $300 million office building unless you're, you know, Bill Gates, right?
Right.
So this gives, you know, I think the average investor an opportunity to invest in real estate. And it's liquid. Obviously, you can buy and sell stock, whereas you can't just buy and sell at $300 million.
So her responsibility is mostly leasing,
Yes,
which is cash flow,
yes.
the revenue flow to actually justify the investments that you make.
What's liquid? You just said it's liquid. I was like, oh, what's that?
Oh, that's a good question.
Yes.
Liquid means you can turn it to cash very quickly. Like if you buy a stock, you can go sell it and get whatever that's worth right away. Versus if you own a house, for instance, it might take you several months to sell your house, to close, and to actually get your money back. So it's basically how quickly you can turn it to
You can
cash.
convert your asset into cash.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? All right. So here we're talking about revenue flow into an investment. And we use the term cash flow. And the return on investment is going to be based upon how much revenue is coming in given the capital you've invested in the property. She negotiates most of the leases. So what exactly goes into negotiating the lease to ensure the revenue flow or the cash flow is adequate to justify the investment the company is making.
So, as Professor Amin said, I negotiate the deals. So if you are, say, you represent Google, right? You work for Google, and Google needs office space. And you come to, and my market is, I have about 2 million square feet I'm in charge of, which is in the Philadelphia market. So I'm just about an hour and a half down the road. But so you're looking for office space, and you might come in to this space and look around and say, you know, it kind of works, but I need more offices, I need more glass. Glass is one thing that's expensive. Infrastructure is expensive. Open ceilings are actually expensive. If you've seen probably on a television show, you see kind of office space, boring office space, it has like boring ceilings. Believe it or not, the open ceiling and the ductwork makes it more expensive. But so I would negotiate with you if you came in and said, I need 30,000 square feet of office space for my Google office in Philadelphia, right? And then what I'm going to do is figure out, okay, if that's what you want it to look like, how much is it going to cost me? So then I get my construction team to price it out, and we get numbers on that to figure out, okay, if it's going to cost me, say, $10 million, okay, to build that for you. I'm thinking, okay, well, if I'm going to spend $10 million, either I need you to commit to do a 10-year term at a certain rent, and then I know I'm getting my money back and getting a return on the investment, or I'm going to give you half of that, and you're going to have to pay the other half of it yourself. And then maybe we'll do a 7-year deal or a 5-year deal, or maybe the rent is higher or lower depending on how long of a term. So those are kind of the different metrics we look at as it relates to negotiating a deal. And then that, every single space in my building generates a different cash flow, which then creates the whole NOI on the property. So that gets a little bit more complicated if we go floor by floor, suite by suite. But in general, you know, my tenants in Radnor, Pennsylvania are on average 10,000 square feet. I do have a couple big ones. Lincoln Financial, you've probably heard of them. The football stadium in Philadelphia is named after them. They are my largest tenant. They have about 300,000 square feet with me. And then I have some smaller tenants, some startups that are, you know, 1,000 to 2,000 square feet. But in general, on average, they're about 10,000. And normal terms for a 10,000 square foot deal is probably a 5 to 7 year deal. And again, it really depends on what you, the client wants your space to look like and what you're requiring of the landlord. And then that goes to figure out what kind of rental rate am I going to charge you to make sure I make my money back.
Yeah.
What is like the paperwork like? Do you have like lawyers on your side working with you, or do you have to like go through everything like
That's a great question, because one thing that's interesting, to do what I do, I have to have a real estate license. And it's actually the same license that you would have if you sold houses. And it kind of makes no sense because the deals on my end are so much different. But that was actually very intuitive, because lawyers are always on both sides of the transaction. So whereas where I come in is the business terms of the deal, and I make all those decisions, but there's certain negotiated clauses that are in our lease that we won't negotiate, some that we will change. And whoever the tenant is, they're always going to have a lawyer. And we have 4 lawyers at Brandywine that also work on the transaction. So the lawyers kind of go back and forth on, you know, the insurance that we're going to require. You know, when we're going to put them in default, different types of things like that. And then I get to decide, are we going to give them any free rent? How much rent are we going to charge them? How much capital are we going to give them? But yes, there's always lawyers involved. And the lease is about 30, 40 pages long, so it's a long document. But a lot of people get involved. And it generally trades back and forth, on average, probably 3 to 4 times of comments back, and we respond and make them back.
Well, that's a very good question. Let me follow up on that, because I pointed out that real estate is very multidisciplinary. You know, so you can come into real estate with so many different perspectives. When you have to customize space for a tenant, you also have to work with architects and engineers and designers and production and construction, basically. Would you comment a little bit on that as well, as part of the package, not just lawyers you deal with,
Sure.
but other partners, parties that have to come into play to answer that question?
So you may be someday working for a software company, and you come into a space and maybe the last person that was in it, so you're in an office building that, say, is 20 years old or 15 years old, and you come into the space that's vacant because you want to be in that area. Location is always important. And so you come in and it was a law firm. Say the law firm just vacated, the law firm moved somewhere else, and you're like, ooh, this doesn't work for me. I want open space, cool space, techie space, concrete floors, open ceilings. And so there's a price to everything. If you came in and said, I want to do a quick deal, I'm going to take the space as is, because say you are a law firm and you take it as is, I'll do a 2-year deal at a much cheaper rate. But if you do want the space to look different, then I actually have 2 architects who work on my staff. So if you say, well, I need an office here, I might want a conference room there with glass on it, I have somebody who works at Brandywine who will actually draw that for you on a plan, and then I'll send it to you, and you'll say, okay, Jen, this works, or actually, no, I want the kitchen over here, I want this, kind of like, if you're designing your house, you're designing your office space. And so to answer your question, we have architects that are in-house, and then once you say, yes, that works, then I send it to construction folks. And if it's very sophisticated space, or you have lab equipment or any type of heavy equipment, maybe for your film that you're gonna be filming, then I do have in-house engineers also who can look at that. I'm actually, right now I'm doing, I can give you a real life example. I have a client who's looking for 25,000 square feet, and they want to do indoor golf simulations. It's sort of like a country club, but indoor for golf. Still not sure how this is all going to work. However, they're taking space from a call center that just moved out, that kind of jammed people in a space and just had desks like that where like 30 people were working in a row, and I could never figure out how they had that many people in there, which is really a drag on the building. When you have that many people in a space, it really affects your parking lots, because there's so many people out there. It affects your bathrooms, it affects your HVAC capacity and all that kind of stuff. So
Which
they
HVAC?
moved out.
Heating, air
Oh.
conditioning, ventilation.
Thank you.
So if you have a lot of people in a space, the air conditioner is working a lot harder to cool the space down, because you've got a lot of people in a
Yeah.
space versus, when a space is less dense. So now I've brought in engineers, because this golf simulating place wants to put a restaurant in what used to be an office space. Now it is zoned that we can do a retail use there. However, the building has not been a retail use, so I have to bring in, this one is actually a little bit outside of my in-house engineer, so I have to bring in a consultant to check, because you have to check the water pipes, the size of them. You need a grease trap to get rid of all the stuff that happens when you cook things, which is not pleasant in your building. So all sorts of different things that involve engineers. I work with construction people. I work with, where's my designer?
Oh, I think
Here anymore.
she-
I work with interior designers, so often it's actually a passion of mine, so I get involved, but most of the other recent people don't. But I like helping people pick, are they going to put gray carpet with like gold in it, or are they going to pick blue carpet, or are they going to pick cool big black lights above, and things like that. So there is a lot of different facets of real estate. Within Brandywine itself, as a big REIT, we have a marketing department, a legal department, an accounting department. We have what might be relevant to all of you. Brandywine, I think, in the last 5 years has done about $3.5 billion worth of acquisitions and dispositions. So of that amount, we bought assets and sold them for different reasons, different markets. So we have a whole investment team that does, market analysis and looks at buildings, and also looks at different markets to see if we want to go into different areas.
Do the feasibility analysis.
So is that kind of,
Yes,
I have a
question?
question
Go
for
ahead.
both of you. So it seems like in your profession, every day seems like there's something new for you to do. It's not very predictable. There's people you have to get in contact, permits you have to get, and just a lot that comes into your projects. So what type of skills do you think you've developed throughout the years that you weren't necessarily anticipating for, let's say, skills that you've developed throughout the years? That you can
Will you
share?
tell them what your major was when you started?
what?
What's your major?
My major is economics.
Okay, so you started as an economist.
Yes.
So what was your major and what you left? Because it sounds like you had 2 different ones.
No, I was always economics, and I'll give you a little bit of a sidetrack for 1 second, which I think is interesting, because I had no idea that I was interested in real estate. I knew I was interested in business. I was kind of an entrepreneurial person. I remember doing the investments club. So personality, I'm not sure. I mean, one thing I think is flexibility. The one cool thing about what I do, because I deal with so many different tenants and so many different types of business, and I love that because I think it's really interesting every day to meet all different types of people. I work with software companies, so I mentioned that, tech companies, law firms, I think that is interesting. But when I graduated from Lafayette, I actually went into politics for 5 years, which is kind of interesting. So it's not always a direct line to figure out where you want to go in life. and I worked for 2 different members of Congress a million years ago. And then I moved to California, and I ran a nonprofit, and I raised a lot of money to help underprivileged kids learn about economics. So that kind of brought 2 things that I'm passionate about, was I would go into an oracle and say, will you give me $20,000 to adopt this school down the street, and I'm going to train your employees to go in and teach these kids about economics. So that was kind of a really fun thing to do. And then when I moved back to Philadelphia, we were building the first skyscraper in Philadelphia in 20 years, which was a really cool project. Now, I had sales experience, fundraising experience, politics, all sorts of experience with that, which we won't go into. But I think you have to learn to be a good listener, and life was a lot different back then. There was a lot of more getting along between everybody than I would say there is today. So that's a different skill. But I think I met my boss, and he took a chance on me, I think, because he thought I had the personality to help sell real estate, but I didn't know real estate. I had a background from Lafayette. I learned economics. I enjoyed math and running numbers, but that wasn't what I had done. So it's a great question, because it just shows, there's so many different things that you can enjoy doing. Whereas for me, being on the sales side, what I enjoy about that is I'm in and out of the office all day. I am out showing office space to clients, and then I'm meeting with architects, and then I'm meeting with my development folks, and then I am going to the township, so that's, to me, is fun. Some people are like, oh my God, that sounds horrible. I just want to be at a desk. I don't want to do that. I want to run numbers and figure out, should we buy that building in Raleigh-Durham? Because that was actually something we looked at, moving to a different market. And so that's one thing to kind of figure out in your personality, what you think you're going to enjoy. Because some people, want to be out and about. Some people want to be at a desk. Some people, the office market has changed since COVID. So some people want to go into an office. Some people want to go into some hybrid situation. The only thing I would recommend is that when you do go into the working world, is find a mentor, and definitely make sure you have face-to-face time. That's one of my messages that I said before.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, I don't know if
Yeah.
Dallas has the
Yeah, I was actually
personality of how you.
Yeah, I was actually gonna ask Mr. Dallas a question. I know I had asked earlier about, I guess, why did politicians have to get involved in your, because I know you work with hospitals. Yeah, in your business. Can you kind of explain more of that? Because I think that you did a good job explaining it to, I guess, to me and the little group that we had, but I think everyone else here could benefit from that.
Sure, absolutely. And that would be one of the things that I didn't think I would be so involved in, is the politics side of things. When I started in real estate, it was because I had a friend that said, I think you'd be good at this. I think you'd be good at selling real estate. So I started as a broker, did that for a while, and I worked for an owner in California, and then came back to the Philly area and working with the hospitals now. So the politics side of things is, as I'll kind of repeat a little bit what I did in the other room, is there's a large piece of ground, farmland in Whitehall, which is right up the highway from here. It would seem like, because it is 45 minutes from the closest hospital, especially in traffic, to either Muhlenberg, Cedar Crest, St. Luke's, any of the hospitals, that it would make sense that if we were to build a hospital in this farmland in the middle of Whitehall, that the leaders of the township would think that was a good idea. So what we have to do, because it is zoned residential right now, it's R2, which is half-acre lots, we have to then go in and present our plan to these elected officials, to the township leaders, and have them weigh in, have them give us feedback, have them say, oh, when we went in at first, it was going to be a small hospital, and then they said, oh, we'd like a bigger hospital. Okay, we'll do that. We were thinking of maybe having a restaurant on site for the staff to be able to eat at. We don't want any restaurants. There's enough restaurants in Whitehall. Okay, let's take the restaurant out. We'd like to do a behavioral health facility there because it's a huge need in Whitehall. That wasn't that well received, so maybe we take the behavioral health out. We'll do that in a later stage kind of thing. So all this give and take conversations with these 7 elected officials to try to figure out what they will then give us the yes vote for, to let us move forward with building a hospital in the neighborhood. I'm not talking about, a casino. It's a hospital, right? So back and forth for 18 months. 18 months back and forth with these officials, trying to figure out what they would like us to do, and only to lose the vote 5-2, denied. So we are now starting from zero again. We have a piece of farmland in the middle of Whitehall that has not been approved for
The kind of use.
the kind of use that we'd like to do. It was a gift to us, so the gift that was given to us by the family when the brother passed away said he'd like to see it be used for healthcare. That's what we're trying to do. And we gave that message as we're presenting, like this was a gift to us. Yes, our basis is zero, not accounting for all that we spent on engineering, which is not zero anymore. And so, trying to present this to the officials to get them to give us the yes vote to move forward. So I didn't think I'd be so involved with politics, but I would say I am in a township meeting every single month.
Let me clarify something that I think a little background here. There are 3 participants in any real estate development project. You have the government that plays a role in how the development is going to roll out, because by law, they are required to plan and make sure that uses in the area are compatible and that they are developed in such a way that they can provide the infrastructure and everything that the public needs. So there's a public need there, which is a responsibility of the government. So every development has to go to the government for permits. But you as a developer is an investor. You're a private business. You're looking at supply and demand, and you want to satisfy a need in the market. So you're looking for opportunities to make money or to put a service in place that the public needs. And then, of course, there's the public who have to agree to whether that development is something that they want to accept in their neighborhood. So all 3 has to come together before the project can actually move forward. So the role of the government is what he's talking about, getting the permits and the regulations and the zoning and those changes to accommodate that kind of development, given the development you're going to put on that site, the purpose for which it's being used, a change from what the land used to be before to what is going to be used now, all has to be compatible with the land use planning and the zoning code and requirements for the community. The government has a very big role to play.
And a lot of these meetings are open to the public, so anyone can come and chime in and say, it's a term called NIMBY,
Right.
not in my
Not in my
backyard.
backyard.
Right? Get a lot of NIMBYs at these things where I don't want that in my backyard. So then we have to try to satisfy those people by saying, all right, well, here's where your house is. If we set up the hospital way over here and plant trees in front, you won't even know it's there. Well, what about when the helicopter comes? Well, the helicopter's only going to come in an emergency, and it's probably going to be helpful if it's able to land there. Well, how many times a month is that going to be?
Right.
Well, the hospital we just opened in Hecktown, we've been open a year, we've only had 10 helicopter evacuations, so less than 1 per month. These are all questions that I have to be able to answer at that meeting when they get brought up with all the people that are concerned about something being built close to their house.
So
Yes, of
actually,
course.
to
Yeah, go ahead.
piggyback on that, because I actually brought a prop. Just because I thought, because it kind of goes with what you were saying, but this is actually a project, I'll just pass this around because I think it might be interesting, that had gotten approved permit-wise, but the difference between what Dallas was trying to do is that this piece of land that we bought had been a site for Biomed Realty, and it was a lab, and so it already was a zone for by right, yeah. And so, but what we propose to do is build an office building, not a hospital, but a home medical use building for the University of Pennsylvania. So they were right down the street, and their building was very obsolete and antiquated. So we had about 26 acres, and we went through this whole thing, and years of getting it approved, and we just signed a lease that was in the papers about 2 weeks ago for a build-to-suit. And as part of this, we're building a 150,000 square foot office building for a chemical company called Arkema. And it's right next to Penn Medicine. And then as part of it, there's a hotel use. And what I will tell you is this is all across the street from the high school in Radnor, which is actually where Dallas went to school. And I found out. The school district was like, what are you guys doing here? The parents in the area were like, what are you doing here? And the township commissioners were like, how's this going to affect traffic? And the one thing we were able to prove was that the traffic would actually get better because we had uses where what was there wasn't just pure office, and everybody was coming at 8 and everybody was leaving 4 to 5 or 5 to 6, whereas when you have hotels, people come at different times. When you have certainly medical use, people are coming throughout the day. So it wasn't going to come at the same time as when school was coming. That was their big fear, was that the office was everybody, all these cars were going to merge at the same time right off of this highway where everybody, all the kids were trying to go to school. So I'll just pass this around because you can just kind of see some images. But this is this pretty office building that we're about to break ground on. You know where it is, yeah?
Yeah.
Right off of Lancaster Avenue, 476, but it just kind of just shows you.
Yeah.
Follow-up question, I'm hearing like two things, like, I guess, how, like, the appeasement of the people who are living in those areas, but also this idea of zoning. So can either one of you or both of you speak to, I guess, the first question I want answered is the zoning thing, and then I guess the second one is like, how do you appease people when you have like this project? Yeah.
We had a conversation about gentrification a week ago, and the role the community can play. Because community has an interest in the neighborhood. People are very used to their neighborhood being what it is, and there's tradition and legacy and all sort of things. And then you're going to bring something new that changes the dynamics in the area altogether.
Yeah.
And of course, there are some people who are going to be very happy to see you there, and you don't have to convince. And there are some people who, no matter what you put there, are going to object. It doesn't matter what adjustments you make, they're just going to say no, because they don't want you there. And then there's a group in between that you have to convince to support your movement, to convince the politicians and everybody that it's okay to put that property there. Okay. The zoning requirements are almost like regulations that the city has already passed. It's a law. And you've already agreed that this area is going to be for institutional development, this area is going to be residential, this is going to be shopping, commercial, and that's what it is. So if you come in and say, I'm going to put something in a farmland, which is not zoned for institutional use, then the zoning code has to be modified or adjusted, or a variance has to be given to you, an exclusive variance, for you to do something in that location that wasn't supposed to be there. And it takes a lot of conversation to convince everybody to do that. That's the zoning thing.
So
One
what
of the-
conversations are you having with those people of like, oh, I want to put this hospital here because it's gonna like save lives? No, why? Like, or can you explain that?
It's very different from, we purchased some land in Gilbertsville, which is just a bit south of Boyertown, south of here. And the first meeting I went to, I had somebody come up to me and go, hey, really glad you're here.
Yeah.
You know, something like that. And the meeting was fantastic. And the questions that were asked weren't, when's the helicopter come in? How long are your lights on? It was, can I get my hip done there? Can my daughter deliver a baby there? Those are the questions that I was getting at that meeting. So that was, you know, I reported back on that meeting like, this is fantastic. These guys love us. They want us here. You know, the township, you know, it seems like the township should not be an issue. So the Whitehall, I think they're fed up with traffic is difficult there. There's a high school across the street. They're worried about traffic coming out onto their road that's already backed up. They've got a situation when it comes to traffic, and it comes that part of MacArthur Road is dangerous. There's been several fatalities on that road. They just think that
Wouldn't a hospital be great for that?
you would think so. But they would prefer it to be 154 houses. So what we have to try to do is kind of say, all right, maybe if we build some homes and maybe a hospital. And the one thing that I want to make sure I touch on this is the one thing I've learned at working at a hospital is a lot different than what Jen has to deal with, because the hospital is going to be here for a long time. So my negotiating tactics can be like, oh, you don't want to do this? Okay, we're going to wait a couple of years, maybe you don't get reelected, because we'll come back. Because it's very different than, I need this space right now, I need it now, I'll do this deal. We can say, it's not going to work for us now, we'll come back in a couple of years, we'll come back in 5 years, we'll come back in 50 years. The hospital will probably still be here, I won't, but the hospital may be, so it might not be the right time. Whitehall, which might not be the right time to develop. And we might just have to wait, which is difficult considering the money we've spent to try to push this through, but it's something we have to deal with.
A follow-up question, I'm sorry, because like I caught on that you said that you would like to, I guess, appease the township, like put houses there. Are you allowed to do that? I mean, like, you work at a hospital.
I don't want to. I'm not a home developer.
Oh.
So what I do is I partner with a residential developer, sell off a portion of it and let them do it.
Oh.
But that's not something I want to do.
It seems like real estate is more so about negotiation
Very much
more
so.
than anything. It's like, oh, okay, thank
Very
you.
much.
Your question here? Yeah, go ahead.
So I was curious.
And then we'll
whether-
come to you in the back, okay? Yeah.
I was curious whether you guys had to had any properties that were in different countries, any companies that you work with in foreign countries, so any experience with that as
International.
well.
Is there any international dimension to what you do?
We do not own anything internationally. I do have several tenants who are headquartered internationally, so I have dealings with international people, but we do not. I don't know.
Yeah, when I was a broker, lived in California, I did a few international deals, but no, we're not in another country. I didn't do any deals overseas, and I believe our license, Jen, if I'm correct, we're only allowed to do it in
I
our
think so,
state.
yes, yes.
Yeah.
And one
So
of the
we-
tenants I'm talking to now is headquartered in Austria. So that's interesting, and so that is one thing that makes Zoom or Teams or whatever type of virtual meeting, that makes things convenient, right? That we didn't have however many years ago. Because I've had meetings with him and with architects and you know, space planners on the phone with people internationally, but they would be moving to open a headquarters in Philadelphia.
If you're interested in international development, real estate development, come talk to me later. All right. Yeah, you-
That's a lot of cool things to do
Yeah,
internationally.
So I know like there's like multiple ways, like you guys said, to like get involved in real estate. So like my question is like, you know how there's like rental properties like Airbnb, we have house hacking, wholesaling, like what do you think is like probably like, I would say the best efficient and legal way to like have any of those, or maybe there's some more ways that I don't even know about. What do you think is the best way to gain cash flow?
What kind of investment strategy? Like, are you going to be small scale property, flipping properties?
Yeah, like anything like that.
Versus
Yeah.
going to commercial, industrial, or
Right.
some other type? How do you decide which is best for you? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay.
For me, it was a comfort factor. Kind of selfish. I didn't want to work on the weekends, so I didn't want to do residential. Because residential is all, show me this house at 6 o'clock tonight. No, I don't want to do that. I want to go home and watch the Eagles play. It's not, I didn't want to work nights and weekends. So I would prefer to do commercial. When I was a broker, it was industrial. I did industrial. Industrial real estate is 4 walls, a roof, and a sprinkler system. That's what it is, right? So, yeah.
We're doing very well right now.
And in this market, in the Lehigh Valley, you want to be an industrial broker.
Going up.
Absolutely. So it just kind of depends on what makes you comfortable. If you love working weekends, you love meeting people at houses and staging homes and doing that kind of thing, then residential may be for you. I didn't think it was for me. I preferred the more corporate kind of 9 to 5 or 9 to 7 kind of job where it was one thing that my mentor told me. He said, all right, well, if someone doesn't make seeing the property a priority, then it isn't a priority for you. So if they tell you, oh, I'll see the property at 6 o'clock tonight, like, no, like we'll see it during regular business hours. If you don't want to do that, then you're not serious about it. You'll find somebody else. So it's personal preference to me, in my opinion. So I'm not going to add anything.
Different strategies can be used. Go ahead.
How has like all these global events affected the way you guys do business and negotiate certain deals now?
Recent economic events, interest rates changes, supply chain problems and all that.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Do you possibly mean like a global pandemic that might have just happened?
Including the pandemic.
Yeah, most of the UK energy prices.
Yes, well, there's a whole list, right? I mean, I think for me, for office use, the biggest thing I can speak to is really what COVID did for office use, and it's really changed the way we work, and it's going to change how all of you work, which I think is good for the future of everybody's mental health, right? I mean, I don't think, don't videotape me and put this on
No.
YouTube.
Yeah, right. I was wondering, if I said a few things about Whitehall, I don't necessarily.
I know, I'll get in trouble, but I think,
So
my
for
bosses
domestic
would
consumption.
not like this, but I think it's
It's
not a
for
bad
educational
thing
purposes.
for people to have some sort of flexibility in their life.
Right.
If, when we graduated from Lafayette, a couple days ago, it was, you were in a grind, and I was in the office every day, I was the first one there, I didn't leave until my boss left. That was like a badge of honor. Sometimes he'd be there until 10 o'clock, and I'd be sitting at my desk doing nothing until 10 o'clock, because it was like, I can't leave until he leaves. That way is not any longer, and it's, I think, a really good thing for all of you, because it doesn't make sense, and it's not efficient, and it's not healthy for anybody's brain. And I think sitting in traffic at the same time as everybody else
Commuting.
every day isn't, but yet we need to do this and see each other. If we were all little squares on a computer right now, we wouldn't be getting out of this what we're getting out of it, right? I'm so glad to see each of your faces and to be here together. And so I think, to answer your question, is I think the way people, in my world, the global pandemic changed the way people are going to work forever, and people, it's still evolving, because if you did a really long-term lease in 2018, you're still in that lease, so you can't just walk away from it. But right now, in 2022, 23, 24, leases are coming due in office buildings, and people are trying to figure out healthy ways for people to come together. People still need to meet in person, they need to collaborate, but they don't need to do it necessarily 5 days a week for 10 hours a day. It might be, the whole team comes in Tuesdays and Wednesdays, and that's when you plan that, and maybe Mondays is your head down work that you can do at home, and you don't need to be together. So I don't know that it's fully figured out, so I don't know that I'm giving you a great answer, but it's still evolving, and I think spaces, the way people are designing them, which goes back to your question of architects, is changing. There's a lot more kind of like, used to be before, nobody wanted to see the kitchen, it was in the way back, and there was just like a coffee maker now. Now the kitchen is here, open with an island, like it is in a house, like a brand new house that you see on like HGTV when they're doing all this stuff. That's how people want their office spaces. They want office spaces to feel cozy, like your home. There's more couches and like comfortable areas for people to sit in. There's more kind of like high tops for people to kind of move around throughout the day, whereas, you might want to work at an office desk for a little while. You might want to have a desk that stands up. You might want to sit in a couch and have a meeting. And so I don't know if that really answers your question, but I think we're still figuring that out, how that's changed my industry. But I think people are coming up with creative solutions of how to still come together, but it's changing of how people work.
From an investment point of view, though, it's creating vacancies, repositioning space to accommodate those needs, which you as an investor has to be ready to customize for your customers. And it's something that you probably had not anticipated had it not been for the changes that have
Absolutely
emerged
not.
and the direction in which society is going right now
And-
in terms
and-
of the space needs that they have.
The biggest thing we're seeing in the office market is a flight to quality. So one thing that I'm lucky is I work in Class A office buildings. So I work in really big, shiny, fancy new office towers that are all amenitized. And that actually goes to your value add that we can talk about. But
Exactly.
people care about, so where you're going to come work, if you're going to actually spend the time to commute in and come to an office, you want the office space to be flexible and comfortable and somewhere that you want to come that makes you feel happy and productive and all those things. But you also want to have food nearby. You want to make sure you have maybe a fitness center nearby. You want to have, so people really are caring about what type of amenities are accessible. And one thing I can tell you, so I just did a law firm deal last week. They were in 12,000 square feet in a Class B market, about 15 minutes away. They always wanted to come to Radnor, but they could never afford it. So what they did is they came to we had a meeting. They leased about 5,000 square feet from me, so they got much nicer space, but they have about half as much as they had. For me, that's 5,000 square feet of absorption that I didn't have, but for the market, unfortunately, they downsized. So we are seeing people trying to figure out how to work smarter and to have nicer space, which I think will bode well for the really high-end landlords. For the lower landlords that have kind of more Class B or older buildings, I think it's going to be interesting to see what happens.
There are two topics on our list that I wanted to touch on. You just mentioned that value added, creating value with real estate to be competitive in the market. And also, once you do that, how long do you hold on to the investment? What's your investment holding period that you take into consideration as you're designing your space for the market and trying to remain competitive as well? So what value are you creating? And how long do you hold on to that investment? You talk about that.
Yeah, if we could do it from a tenant side, I can
Right.
speak about it from a tenant side of things. So we talked a little bit in the other room about the kind of expense that we spend on an office space we're going to rent. So usually a cancer center building, a building that they treat cancer in, you want it to be top of the line. You want it to be nice, new, where people come. It's a terrible point in their life, and they're coming there. You want it to feel comfortable. You want it to be nice. You want to be able to look out on some nice plants on a garden, that kind of thing. So we're going to spend a lot of money to make that space what it needs to be. There's something called a vault in a cancer building where that's where you go for your radiation therapy. That vault alone costs $1 million to make that room, just the room. So if I'm going to be investing $1 million in one room and building this gorgeous facility, it's not really going to be something that I'm going to want to rent from Jen, right? Because if I'm spending $300, $400 per square foot, right? That's what I'm talking about. Per square foot of space that we own, per square foot of space that we're occupying, we would want to own that because we're spending so much money to turn it into what we want it to be. As opposed to like a doctor's office where it's still going to be nice. We still want you to be able to come there and feel safe and feel like it'll be a place where that makes you healthy. But it's not going to be $400 or $500, but it's probably going to be like $200 a foot. But it's a space that we're more likely going to be able to lease because, I mean, I mentioned this in the other room, but how many people like 10 years ago thought you'd be able to see your doctor on this, right? It's crazy now. So there will always be the need, and it's a medical thing, for hands-on bodies. There will always be a need for the doctor to have to be able to touch the person. But that is becoming less and less. There's certain things that you will always have to go to the doctor for, but, you know, cough, sniffles, aches and pains, you can get the doctor visit on your phone and online and get that prescription filled online. So those doctor's offices, I don't know if we're going to need them in 5 to 10 years. There will always be a need for some doctor's office, but maybe not 20 of them. So those are the spaces that I'm more likely to lease, whereas the cancer treatment space where I'm spending so much money to try to make this a place where people can get better, and it's important, we'd like to own that. So, and a value add thing, it kind of depends on if we want to own it, is the expense we're willing to pay on it. And right now we're putting up a Department of Education building in Center Valley. And 70,000 square foot building, sim labs, all this stuff. The amount of money we're spending on IT alone would make you fall out of your chair. We're obviously going to be owning that building. So it just kind of depends on the value add. For us, that influences ownership.
So you're talking about the length of time it's going to take to recover your investment.
Right.
And also make a return on your investment
Right.
in terms of profitability.
Yeah.
So that's going to factor into your strategy as to what you're investing in, how long you're going to hold on to it, what kind of investment in terms of design, flexibility, and other things you're going to build into it to accommodate the market. I think that's same here.
Sure, I mean, I think it's different because when you're investing in a space, you know, as long as that equipment is operational and good, you know, that's
Right.
going to last for 20 years, say, or
Yep.
however long it is. So in my world, we buy and sell buildings. We sometimes will buy a building as with a JV, with a venture partner. And that might be a different opportunity where we're looking to make some money, say. So we might buy a building that we know is in a good market, but it's half vacant and the insides of the building aren't that nice. So if we go in and we put in all new bathrooms and make the, you know, if this were drywall and we put all new glass and we make the building look really pretty, that then if we were to say we were getting $20 from all of the tenants in rent, and we know for the vacant space we can now get $40 a square foot, right? We might do that, come in, fix it up, make it beautiful, add some amenities, and then sell it. So that could maybe be a 3-year process. Now, when we develop the building that I kind of was passing around, which is a new building we're about to develop, that's generally different when it's going to be a wholly owned new development. We're probably going to look to hold that because it's going to cost a lot more to build. This is ground up construction. And we went through the whole due diligence and went through getting, now it was already zoned, so we didn't have to go through zoning, but we had to get permits and we had many neighbors asking a lot of questions. That was a much larger process. That's probably something we would hold for 10 to 15 years. So it just depends on how quickly, how much money you're putting in and how quickly, you know, you're going to sell it.
Yes.
So I just have a question about kind of sustainable development, because this is obviously something that's like happening a lot. I mean, we're sitting in a LEED Platinum like certified building. So I'm wondering kind of, firstly, how is the popularity of that changing in recent years? And what are kind of the motives behind that? And within those motives, like what is the cost benefit analysis there? It seems like you're investing a lot of money into making these, you know, more energy efficient, maybe more renewable energy, or some part of that certification is even like plant biodiversity and such like that. And so is that really worth the cost in a commercial setting? Because obviously Lafayette, they want to be like, look how sustainable we are, look at this beautiful building, but $75 million for 105,000 square feet is a lot. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and obviously, I think that's an important question and one that we were talking about earlier, because I'm a huge believer that all of you in this room are going to change the world, and I think it's so important, and keep asking these questions because it's important. And I don't think, from our end, we do it enough. Now, healthcare is going to be a little bit different, so we don't build all of our building LEED. Now, we'll do Fitwell sometimes, we'll do different types of things, but it depends on the return, and it depends on the costs. And so sometimes the cost analysis works, and sometimes it doesn't, quite honestly, and it's going to come from government making us do it. So for instance, when COVID happened, we were talking about this, but we did some significant upgrades in our buildings. And we made all the doors that just open when you walk up, so you don't have to touch anything. And we did some upgrades to the filtration system with the HVAC to make sure the air we're breathing is healthier. We upgraded air systems in the elevators and things like that, because after COVID, at this point, it relates to the market, and tenants aren't going to want to come to a building where they don't feel healthy, right? And I think we're getting more and more, especially big Fortune 500 companies are always asking, what is LEED in your building? And they're building tenant spaces, so while the building might not be LEED, they are asking questions on how healthy is the building, what air am I breathing, how often am I getting fresh air in the building? So, and I know hospitals can have different,
Yeah, for us,
different metrics,
we just
but-
do LEED certified buildings for.
What's
any new
LEED?
we build.
something environmental, something design.
Yeah.
But essentially, it's a government,
Yes,
Yes,
environmental
yes.
efficient design.
it's a government designated
Certification.
process.
Certification, you've got to go through all these, jump through all these hoops and to be shown as a LEED certified building.
So basically environmental friendly.
Right.
Yes.
Got it. Thanks.
Environmentally friendly building, yes,
And
exactly.
I'm not sure, I don't think anybody's building things that aren't environmentally friendly because you couldn't.
Right,
Because the
not allowed
township
to.
wouldn't approve it. Like, you have to be treating water and stormwater management and all of that stuff. So a new building is always going to be energy efficient. It just depends on at what level. And I think it's going to be when tenants demand it. And I'm seeing more and more. So what I get in my world, when I show a big tenant space, then they'll send me an RFP. And it has their whole list of questions on what's involved in this building, what's going on in your space, and we want to build our space with all recycled materials and
Yeah.
We live in a market, we live in a market where
So we're not- Yeah.
demand, consumers are going to demand certain things. This is what I want to buy, I'm willing to pay for it. And suppliers, developers are going to respond. So the more people ask for LEED certified buildings and environmentally friendly designs and, sort of lower carbon footprint and all those elements, now suppliers are going to have to respond by making that product available for customers who are looking for it. And that's what's going to justify the cost.
For us, it does save money with the lights.
And the environment.
With the lights.
Okay.
But our lights are on 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. Like super bright, 500 watt bulbs, they're on all the time, but we do all halogen or whatever, the nicest, newest, most environmentally sound, doesn't use as much power, but we do it for the whole hospital.
To be
And it does, yeah, and to be costly, yeah, because it saves us money.
Okay, interesting.
So this is a bit of an off-topic question, but it is related to real estate. So like more recently, like my family, we had like tenants who lived in like one of our houses, and basically they like weren't paying rent. And so like my dad took like legal action like after giving warnings and stuff. And we went to like a few lawyers and stuff. But nothing was able to be done because of the courts being backed up after COVID. And so like my question was like, do you think like after COVID has it impacted the way like people have been investing in properties and owning properties? Because if courts are backed up, then like how are people able to resolve issues? Because I know the tenant was like, okay, I'm gonna live here because like you're not gonna be able to do anything. You can't kick me out because the courts are backed up, and that might take like 1 year, and in that time I can like find another property,
So you talk about the risk and the recourse.
Yeah,
It's so frustrating for your parents.
yeah.
That's your question.
I think in my world, we do credit checks. We're only leasing to big companies that we know are going to pay their rent. So So that rarely happens. My recourse is that I put you in default if you haven't paid me rent, and we can take court action and go to court. But I can tell you, I've been at Brandywine for 20 years, and I think it's happened 3 times with my tenants. So it doesn't happen that often, but super frustrating on residential. Residential is a whole different
another
rules
reason I didn't
because you're
want to do
dealing with people's
residential.
home versus
Right.
office space, so it's totally.
Yeah, because like for that instance, it was more of like a divorce issue. And so like, it was like difficult and like, so I was on my end, like, because it's more of a family thing, I was looking at like ways of like alternative ways. And like, it's just like the legal action was just not practical whatsoever. Like, and even now, like courts are still backed up. So it's like, I know like me personally, like I was like looking at like personal like real estate investments, but like if that like legal, like, you know, because there's always that risk of like, okay, like what if tenants aren't paying? Like, what are you gonna do? You're literally just, you know.
The
you're
courts
not-
most of the time will side with the tenant.
Exactly, because housing is a basic necessity.
Yeah.
So the courts are very reluctant to move somebody into the streets without, following all the possible solutions to resolve the issue. Let's come here first before they'll come to you. Yeah.
So I have a more general question.
Mhm.
So for someone who's not too aware about the real estate market, what would you suggest is the best way to get involved in it and just learn more about it?
Take a
You
Heaney's
know
class.
Yeah. How do you get into real estate?
How do you get into real estate? There's simple magazines. I can't think of one off the top of my head, but there are investment magazines that you can read. I know Forbes always does a real estate thing, but there are real estate investment magazines that you can get into and read. When I started as a broker, I really didn't know too much, but when I really kind of broadened my horizons was when I started pursuing a thing called CCIM, which is it's like an investment kind of thing. I always found investments really interesting when it came to real estate, so finding that sort of, and I'm sorry, I cannot think of a single publication off the top of my head right now.
Well, there are a lot of books and
Yeah.
magazines, first time, there are people advertising on television every time that take my course and you become a millionaire in 3 days.
Yeah, don't do
Don't
those.
do those.
Don't do
Don't
that.
do those. Don't-
But also, the reason why I'm here is to advise somebody like you and give you the direction you need to begin to think about it more seriously. That's why we're doing this.
And you know what the other thing is? You obviously have the Gateway Center, you have a whole career thing.
Exactly.
See if you can do an externship
Yes,
in
that's
general,
exactly.
it's just a week long with somebody in real estate or something, and something you're interested in. Because as I said, my start to real estate was through politics and nonprofit, like it's never necessarily a direct line. So I think, and this is one thing of advice I give you guys when you are looking. Ask anybody, and your career center is a huge wealth of people in this entire region who all went to Lafayette. Not very few people will say no if you reach out and say, can I have 10 minutes of your time? I just would love some advice. Not asking for a job, not asking for anything, but I would really love your advice or hear about your journey or how you got to where you were. Do you have 15 minutes to virtually meet me? Very few people, I have to tell you, would say no. And I'm happy to give you all my email addresses. I'm happy to talk to anybody.
Yep, I brought a bunch
15
of
minutes.
cards too.
You know what I mean? And so that to me is, I always tell people like, don't tell, because if you connect with that person, they're gonna try to help you. And if you are looking for a job, it's a great way to find one without asking for one, because then that person is like, wow, wait, this is what they've gotten to know you. Then they're kind of invested with you, and then they're like, wait, but I know somebody, I don't have a job, but I know somebody here who does, or I know somebody, and it really is about networking. You have such a group of people, at your career center, and, they reach out to me sometimes, and I talk to people. but-
Guys, you have to tell these guys, the reason why they're here is to do exactly that. They're alums, they've been through the process, they know where you are in your career, in your journey, and you're here volunteering their time to connect you to not only the industry, but also to network, which is exactly what Lafayette does. We are very good at doing that, and we make sure that our alums are connected, and our alums love Lafayette for what Lafayette has done for them. We hope you're going to do the same thing when you graduate. This is how we build that network and relationships that open doors and provide opportunity for all of you. It's a great question. Maybe 2 more questions, and we'll have to bring this to a close because I know you guys have to study. Yeah, there's one way back there, and then we'll come to her. Zion.
First and foremost, I want to say a massive thank you First and foremost, I want to say a massive, massive thank you for coming today. I have two questions, so bear with me. The first question is, I'm a novice when it comes to real estate, but there are certain things I know, right? And I just wanted to understand what mechanisms you use in terms of assessing real estate. Obviously, you mentioned due diligence. I'm assuming both of you use the cap rate to monitor or assess which sorts of property are profitable. So I just wanted to know what mechanisms you use, whether you're solely depending on the cap rate, IRR, what other things you use just in terms of assessing that.
That's more for you.
For my company, it's a little different. When I evaluated a building in Pennsburg, it had been a medical building for 20 years. The main tenant was moving out. The whole thing was going to be empty, and there was one dentist on the second floor. Most people would look at that investment and say, I'm not touching that thing. But I talked to the doctor that was moving out, and I said, would you be interested in selling your building? He said, yeah, absolutely. So I bought the building for $700,000. Not me, my company. Bought the building for $700,000. We proceeded to renovate it to the tune of a couple $1 million. It is now a health center for Lehigh Valley in Pennsburg. It's in a market that has been a medical building for 3 decades. We are now in a building that the market is familiar with. They're familiar with the building, they're familiar with the services that are offered there, but now it's a new face, it's a new company that is giving us a toehold into a new market. So for me and for my kind of business, the evaluation of a good investment is completely different than what you're saying with the cap rate and stuff like that. So for me, the dentist rent maybe covers the cost of the maintenance on the elevator on a monthly basis. Like it's really not, it doesn't make us a lot of money. But it gave us the ability to create a familiar foothold in a new market for us. So for me, it's a lot different than what I'm sure
And for
Jen.
me, and I can't speak to this as much, but I'm happy to set you up with my acquisitions guy. But I mean, we certainly look at cap rates. We run Argus models. Have you heard of that? So you've probably seen them. So, and we'll look at, a building, and if it's an office building, we'll look at, when we go through the due diligence, if we're going to buy it, we will look at how occupied is it, right? If there's a big vacancy, maybe it's a value add if there's a big vacancy, because then we want to invest money and then lease it at a higher rent. Or, what's going on in the market? What are other buildings local to it? So we use CoStar a lot too to compare buildings and see what kind of rental rates they're getting in that market. And then we'll look at, and then we'll also interview tenants and say, because if you're going to buy a building and say, for instance, one of our buildings in Austin is 100% occupied by IBM, and the person you're buying it from is telling you, oh, sure, IBM's staying. They said they definitely want to stay, and then you talk to them and they're like, no, we're out of here in a year. You're like, wait a minute, and all of a sudden the value of the building is completely changed, right? That happened in one of our buildings in Conshohocken recently, where a tenant is subleasing all their space. So, and we're in due diligence period on the other side where we're looking to sell it. So throughout that period, a lot of things happen where you're looking at the market and you're looking at the tenant base and the rental stream or the cash flow. But I guess to answer your question, I mean, we certainly as a big REIT, we're looking at IRR and cap rates. And net operating income, which obviously goes into cap rates, kind of figuring that out.
Thank you. And then the last question I have, obviously we all wouldn't be here if we weren't passionate about real estate, right? Some of us are seniors, some of us are first years. And if there was one piece of advice, I know it's hard to say in maybe one sentence or one word, but if there was one piece of advice you would give us at this very moment in time, just in terms of not only going into real estate, but making a difference in that sector, like both of you have done, what would that be? Please.
You have it? I'll go second then.
Find something you like to do. For me, when I was a broker, it was industrial real estate. It was easy, it was deal after deal. I was working on stuff like under 100,000 square feet, so there were smaller buildings. And it was a churn. It was a lot of being out of. It was a lot of being out of the office and stuff like that. On my resume, I don't think you have this in my bio, but on my resume, one of the lines that I have when I was a broker at a single office, I did over 10,000 cold calls in person, door to door, handing out my information. Because I liked being out in the market and trying to figure out, hey, I noticed your building, you've got a really full yard. There's one up the street that's got a much bigger yard and it's fenced and it's in a better area. Here's my information, here's the building information, would you like to come check it out? I liked doing that. That was fun for me. So find the thing, there's a lot more than one sentence. Find the one thing you like to do and then do that. For me now at the healthcare real estate, it's finding new locations. For me, it's site selection. I really enjoy that.
And that's good advice, and I think if you enjoy it, then it's not really work, right? And one of the things I'm in the process of building a house right now for myself, which is the worst time in the world to be doing. But I realized that I really like design work as well, which I was talking to one of the other students about. And you know what, that's what keeps me up at night, like thinking of that kind of stuff and looking into offices. So that's why within my leasing job, I actually help tenants do that because I'm passionate about it. So find something you're passionate about. And one thing I was prepared to say here, and I have to say, I'm so excited to meet all of you, because when I came to Lafayette, it didn't necessarily look like this room. And I think what's really important, one thing I would say, is get to know somebody who doesn't look like you. And be prepared, because the most successful companies in the world are the most diverse and come with different people who look different, who are different races and genders and ages and all of that. And I just think that this room is so cool, and I am so grateful for all of you for spending the night with us. It's been great. And find a mentor.
Last question.
Yeah, I guess after that, it's a kind of a hard follow-up, but
Yeah, I was gonna say drop the mic.
yeah, really. But I guess bring this kind of, I guess, full circle or home, for me at least. I'm looking into real estate, of course, like, as I said, production company, all that, but also hopefully to build generational wealth for, you know, me and my family, because I'm coming from a place of like, I'm doing this for me and my family, you know, like there's a lot of us, you know, so, and I know you guys are more so, I don't want to say like in a corporate side of like, you know, that's a scary word for you guys, but like, it's different from, let's say I'm going out and flipping a home. So would you say that in the line of, in your world, does this type of real estate bring more like security in like what you're doing than, let's say, any other route in real estate?
Does it bring more security? And that's a very admirable thing in helping build generational wealth for your family, and it's important for sure. And I think with risk comes reward, right? I mean, we learned that. That's Econ 101. So I think flipping homes can be a lot riskier, and it can certainly be more rewarding. You know, in my world, I have a salary, but I get paid on the deals I do. But if I were a broker who didn't have a salary, my reward would be higher. So people who do full brokerage make more money than I make as in-house. So it really depends on, I think, what you love to do, because take a chance on yourself, because who else is going to? And I've met you tonight, and you're pretty fabulous. So take a chance and take a risk, because I think you'll be successful. But find something you love. So if it's what you want to do, you'll be successful.
Yeah. When I started as a broker. And as a broker, you make $12,000 a year. I'm not kidding. That's what you get. Your stipend is $1,000 a month. So find a place that's rent is less than $1,000 a month. And then you get commission, a portion of that, on every deal you do. Usually you get teamed up with a senior VP or something like that, and they'll kick you smaller deals, you get 25% of those. So, and as you grow, so it took me 3 years to get vice president, and then I was a vice president at a brokerage house, and I was doing great, and I was doing really well. We were having a baby, we were married, this was awesome, and then 2008 came.
Oh.
And it went down in a hurry, and I'm commission only. So I've got one building in escrow that's a $50,000 commission, that's awesome, right? I'm gonna get that. That'll be great, because it's close enough to the end that it's gonna be good. Get another one that's a $25,000, all right, so that's $75,000, that's a lot more than a lot of people make in a year. All right, well, the $25,000 guy defaults, we lose that one. I get zero, right? The 50 still goes through, which is great, okay, awesome. But then that goes to the house payments, kids, all that stuff. And so it got to the point where I was like, all right, I'm asking some of the older brokers, I said, so what do you think? Like, how bad is this gonna get? There was guys who had been in the market 20 years, 25 years, retail guys who were telling their wives, asking their wives, can you go back to teaching? Because I want to make sure we can keep our health care. And I was thinking, all right, my wife's at home with a 6-month-old kid. I don't want to have that conversation. So I'm going to try to go find the ownership side. So don't get me wrong, when I was a VP and the things were good, it was great. We were doing well, we bought a house, we moved to like Palm Springs area, it had a pool, it was awesome, right? But then the bottom dropped out, right? In a year. That $50,000 commission was the last one I saw until I found a new job. So, And then years later, I went, found a job similar to what Jen does now. I had commission plus salary. So less of a commission, and I worked for one guy who owned from like Long Beach to Palm Springs, like he owned $1 billion worth of real estate. And so he was an easy step that I was able to work for somebody like that. And I went back and asked my friend who was asking his wife to go be a teacher, I said, how bad did it get after I left? He goes, I made $30,000 last year. And so this was a guy who was making $300,000 the year before. So it can get really bad. So while you're young,
30,000 could be, you know,
yeah,
just a
so
bit.
while you're young and you don't have kids, take those risks. Go for it. Get after
You don't have to
it.
feed kids and do
Yeah.
that, take risks now.
Yeah, because I would have stayed with it, and I loved it. I thought it was great. I love the freedom. You're your own boss. You work as hard as you want. You take a day off if you need to. But I had to provide for wife and kids, and I couldn't take that risk. So while you're young and you don't have those ties, go for it. Absolutely go for it.
That's a nice way to wrap things up.
Drop that mic.
Right. Right. This is really great, and I want to take this opportunity to thank Jennifer and Dallas for giving us a lot of wisdom to think about. There are opportunities, there are risks. You have to be passionate about what you do and be good at it in order to succeed. And what we're doing here is building the building blocks towards that objective, that goal. So thank you for coming. Thank Jennifer.